But that's interesting. I think history is much broader than what we used to think of it as being. It's not just about battles and revolutions and things. It's about music. It's about culture. It's about all these things that aren't about killing people. And I think that TAMIS has expanded the access of the library and its patrons to get to see these, to have access, to get to experience the music and movies and things of our past.
In 2004, went to the Orphan Film Symposium in, at the time, Columbia, South Carolina. Shout out to Dan Strebor, the founder of Orphans, which is still going. Very important symposium in our field of work.
Orphans was right up my alley, and I was sent there by ETSU to show snake handling films made in Cocke County back in the 1970s. And of course, snake handling in Southern culture is always a big hit with all the archivists. They're kind of amazed by a lot of our culture here.
So Brad was doing a presentation at Orphans on snake handling churches of Appalachia. He was working at the Archives of Appalachia. So, I mean, that's obviously an attraction there for snake handling churches movie. It was actually fascinating footage.
I remember seeing this lady and thinking, oh my gosh, she's real cute. I wonder who that is. And she was very enthusiastic about it. She was presenting a film as well. I think it was early test footage of Audrey Hepburn before she became famous. So later on that night, we met during a party where all the archivists get together in a convention room. Everybody brings a projector and you do round robin and show movies. We were doing pretty good until I put on an Elvis movie on Super 8, one of those digests. I put that thing on and there was kind of like this universal boo in the audience. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what? Nobody was excited except for one person. That was Louisa. She was over there clapping, and I went over there and I said, hey, look, I'm going to take this off before we get mobbed here, but I'll give you a private showing later.
We both had an interest in Elvis, we discovered. And so I came over later in that summer and visited for a few weeks. And that's when we decided, oh yeah, we want to be together. And hey, let's start a regional film archive.
The contract for the Archives of Appalachia, it was a grant-funded deal. It was done. And I had no prospects, none at all, no job in line for the future. I said, Louisa, why don't we just start an archive? We have nothing to lose. I don't know what else I'm going to do. You know, let's just do it. See what happens. Why not? Who says you can't start an archive?
Thank goodness we didn't think too hard about it. Because, you know, we probably would have been like, we can't do this. But, you know, we're both just kind of people like, oh, let's just do it and see how it works.
It was a struggle, but Louisa is smart and she can work it.
So yeah, November 2nd, 2005, I registered Tennessee Archive of Moving Image and Sound as a nonprofit with the state of Tennessee.
She did all the paperwork. She did all the 501c3. She put together a top-notch board, including Dwight Swanson, Ashley Capps, Bill Landry and Doug Mills of the Heartland series, Tammy K. Euseus, a prominent lawyer. We got a great great crew, and we did it. We got it going. You know, we ran that baby from our apartment in Bearden up on the top floor.
What I remember best is the profile that I wrote of them in the early days. That when they were not even a formal 501c3 nonprofit yet, they were working on that at the time. But they were just a man and a woman working together in an apartment on the 8th floor of a building in Bearden. The apartment was very cluttered with all kinds of equipment and stacks of film and reel-to-reel tapes and things like that. But to go in there and see the seed of what became TAMIS as it was happening, and just it was fascinating just researching that story and working with them, and Bradley always say, "Gosh, you got to see this guy. You got to see this," it was like an opening up a whole new window onto Knoxville history.
It was fun. I mean, it was fun. We had such an energy. We were both doing something new, you know, starting something, and like I said, neither of us were very into like writing rules and stuff, or, you know, not rules but policy or whatever. I mean, we were a bit ambitious in calling it the Tennessee Archive Moving Image and Sound, because we just thought, oh well, you know, we'll keep it open, you know, to include anywhere in the state. We soon realized that there's no way. I mean, there was enough in Knoxville, leave alone like the county or East Tennessee.
The very first thing, I think, was an Irwin film from 1940. It was Nitrate. We found that in the theater, the old Capitol Theater. And we got our first NFPF grant, which she wrote. She did all the backbone of everything while I was out there talking with people and doing what I needed to do. So we made an excellent team.
We were really just trying to find material and equipment, going to estate sales, following up on leads, just really following Brad's instincts.
There used to be a lot of nitrate in halls.
There was a significant amount of nitrate, highly flammable film in this trailer.
I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I know there's local stuff in there. And I asked where it came from, and it came from a local projectionist who had passed away, who saved things, Jesse Jones.
The person who it belonged to wanted to sell it. Brad knew the person and said, hey, look, we can't buy it. A lot of it was feature film, Hollywood films. We can't buy it, but could we go through it and pick out the local, anything that's of local interest?
He said, yeah, whatever, be careful, there's snakes, there's mice. I mean, I'm talking dilapidated, mold so thick. I mean, my God, asbestos. You know, I don't know that I would do this today.
So we went in this trailer, I'm not kidding, it was like packed. It was rotten, you know, it was like propped up, and it was just completely overgrown. I
started digging through those heavy reels. She would write down the titles, what kind of condition. These stray cats kept running in and out of holes, scaring the hell out of us.
With just going through all these films, trying to like find stuff that looks like it's, you know, not commercially made or that might be of local interest. I was walking across from one end to the other, and my foot just went straight through the floorboards.
And I looked down after my freak out shock. I just saw that little Welsh head popped up. The rest of her was down underneath the floor, and that little head. Oh, she says, Bradley, help.
I didn't even know that there could be snakes in there. Anyway, I was very badly bruised by that fall, but hey, it's all in the name of, you know, getting local films out of the trailer.
That was quite an experience. It really was. Then we got Jeff Joseph from Sabu Cat to drive all the way from California in a semi to pick up the rest, which was commercial stuff.
Brad and I were like, oh my God, they're going to be driving this back to California. And they were like, do they know what they're driving, you know? The
truck driver, she was a lady, and she was sitting on the edge of that truck while we were loading the nitrate up. She had her old cigarette. She's smoking that cigarette.
Smoking, flicking their ash. But no, this is flammable. Don't flick it. And they're like, I just think, just like smoking, flicking their ash right next to these nitrate films.
I mean, ashing right by the film. And Louisa called her out on it. And, you know, you didn't mess with Louisa. She's tough. She's mean when she wants to be. And that woman was just as shocked as Louisa called her out on. You're going to blow us all up.
I guess they made it back to California. We heard no reports of a giant explosion on the way, but yeah, that was a little bit scary. That was even scarier for me.
It just picked up and picked up and picked up. And as word got out, we started getting attention. We started doing film screenings.
I can't describe the energy. There was such a buzz about it because it was still relatively new to be able to see these kind of images and moving images from your hometown. So it was that buzz again, like those itinerant filmmakers in the 20s and 30s, 50s, 60s. They would film your hometown and then you'd go to the theater to watch it. It was still that feeling of like, oh yeah, that's us. That's us. And that's how we were.
All of them were hits. I couldn't believe 150, 200, sometimes 3 would show up to see these old home movies of Knoxville.
We did a compilation of the Thompson films, put its music. We had members of the Thompson family here. During the film, you could hear like this buzz going around, but I couldn't quite hear what was being said. And then at the end, this woman came up to us, like an elderly woman, and she said, oh, that scene there in the Smokies, you know, where they're standing by the stream and everything. And she said, the woman holding the baby, she said, that baby's me. I'm still speechless.
We had kind of a nice way of working together that had a lot of heart within our productions, a lot of soul, a lot of love. And we worked on those videos, film series we picked up. Finally, Steve caught him and said, let me go to the director of the library and see if we can get you space. Because I told Steve, I said, I'm giving up. We can no longer keep housing Jim Thompson movies from the 1920s in our closet. It's just irresponsible. We can't do this.
When Bradley Reeves and Louisa Trott came in and pitched the idea of they needed a place to do the work they were doing to create the Tennessee Archive of Moving Image and Sound, and we were wondering if there would be any chance of getting a space in the library. And I was intrigued. I wasn't sure what would happen. I saw potentially some conflict with collections, you know, that things we might wish we had that they might get. It's made me a little bit nervous, but I decided that it was well worth the risk. And I was able to persuade the then library director, Larry Frank, to let us give them a space to work in and a home base in the History Center. And I think it was one of the best decisions I ever made. And I'm really proud of what it grew into. I was pretty blatant about the fact from day one that I hoped someday it would be part of the library, and at that point in time, they weren't even ready to think about that. But when the time came that they had other ideas of what they wanted to do, and it did come into the collection, it boosted our potential to collect and preserve history immensely.
Before we transferred the ownership of the collection to the library, we were struggling, you know, to raise funds, and I mean, we did get some funding. Like, you know, local organizations gave us some funding, and we obviously got some very important federal grants to preserve the nitrate collections or nitrate reels that we had found, which was, you know, the highest priority because we couldn't keep them here.
You know, it's just difficult to keep a nonprofit going. You're having to find money, fundraise, write grants, while also trying to do the work. And by that time, Louisa had exited to get an actual job at the children's room at the library, and was also going to graduate school, School of Information Sciences. So she was working on her degree, working at the library, and you know, it was just I think the most practical and smartest thing to do at the time.
TAMIS became this home of lost radio, television, and eventually photographs. That was added to the mix. Then documents. I couldn't keep up. Stuff would come in trash bags. We'd try to throw them in a box and put them away.
So about a year after TAMIS became part of the library and Bradley had the archivist job, they created an assistant archivist job. I applied and fortunately got it in September of 2014.
We were so popular that we were asked to do a lot of things. And I tried to agree to every one of them. But my goodness, all of a sudden we're doing festivals and screenings and trying to archive this, that, and the other.
Connecting with audiences now, connecting with patrons now is a really, really gratifying part of this job. That's the public programming and the leaning into that, because you really do see people respond to this stuff and enjoy it. As far as the Knoxville sessions go, that's something that Bradley had worked on for years. He found out about all these records that had been recorded in Knoxville back in 1929, 1930. That was after the Big Bang of country music in Bristol and after the Johnson City sessions. They came to Knoxville to do these field recordings in the St. James Hotel. Bradley found out about it and sort of started tracking down all these recordings. Jeff Bills, who was also employed by Knox County Archives for years, actually had a website where he put them up online and sort of had the outline of a story. And, you know, for years, Bradley's kind of worked around this, and he decided he wanted to release a CD of them. So he knew I was a writer. I was working on liner notes for them. And then the Bear family came calling. And anybody who likes country music or old-time music or early rock and roll is familiar with the Bear family. Out of Germany, a label that does just amazing work. They are the gold standard in terms of research and notes and production of these sessions. So they decided they were going to release the Knoxville sessions. They'd already done Bristol and Johnson City. But because Bradley and I were here on the ground, we started conducting research. Ted Olson up at ETSU would write the liner notes along with Tony Russell, but Tony Russell's in England and Ted was a professor, so he didn't have the time necessarily to do all this research. So Bradley and I went out all around East Tennessee, tracked down the families of these people who had recorded at these sessions, interviewed them, found recordings, artifacts, photographs, just all kinds of information. And that started before I was an official hire and continued on. And it was a real sort of, you know, baptism by fire and also just fun.
TAMIS, or at least in my case, and possibly Louisa's, was a victim of its own success. There that last year, I think we did something like 18 programs.
On the tail of the Knoxville sessions, we were planning a festival called the Knoxville Stomp. And that was going to be a 4-day celebration of the sessions with live music, film screenings, and what ended up being maybe, I don't know, at least half a dozen venues, maybe more. You know, that was a really challenging task that I can't imagine us taking on the scope of anything like that again. We did the Clarence Brown Festival, of course, and some one-offs, but so much time was just spent organizing that.
That last year was really bad, and I started to get sick, really sick. And I told Louisa, I said, I'm going to have to walk away for my mental health and physical health. I can't do this anymore. I can't work all day, all night, get a few hours of sleep, and do it again. And I'd lost interest in doing programs that didn't appeal to me.
It was very hectic and pretty intimidating, and I felt like I wasn't ready. I mean, I'd just been with this organization officially about a year and a half. Obviously, like I said, I'd been around before, but so, and you know, Bradley had suggested to me not long after I was hired that he was getting ready, that he wanted to leave, and so I really was freaked out by that notion.
My history with TAMIS begins in 2016 when I had just wrapped up my master's degree in my education in film preservation and archiving. And I was embarking on my job search in those fields. I was introduced to Jeffrey Stoiber, who was one of the main administrative professionals for the L. Jeffrey Selznick School for Film Preservation. And I was telling him, you know, I want to work in film so bad. I want to be an audiovisual archivist, and I just
do not have the requirements to get into those fields. And he said, oh, really? What kind of jobs have you applied for? I said, well, there was this one, it was perfect, in my hometown at the Tennessee Archive of Moving Image and Sound. And he looked at me like, oh, one of our graduates just got that job. And that's when I realized, oh, I need to go get this specialized education. I need to learn more about film archiving.
When I first started at TAMIS, my work in the assistance role, in an informal way, work that I didn't realize I was doing, but which of course pays off down the line, was just kind of getting acquainted with the collection, the East Tennessee community, the Knoxville community, and the network of heritage institutions that we have here. My supervisor, Eric Dawson, was coming into the job from a background in journalism and library sciences, and also having just lived in the community for many years and gotten to know it very organically and made relationships with people and had a really valuable perspective on it from that point of view. But what I brought to the table was the formal education that I received at the Selznick School. And even though I didn't have the perspective so much of being oriented to local culture and history, I have the perspective that's coming out of film studies and criticism and things of that sort. So, and being interested originally much more in feature films and that mode of cinema more so than amateur films and home movies.
John's big contribution is TAMIS had received several National Film Preservation Foundation grants before. He really had the foresight and the vision, let's say, to go after some of these collections that were larger and perhaps of more interest than just regional. Walter Barth, Harry Caldwell, these are collections that have international appeal, and Caldwell has received several inquiries from around the globe, I understand. But he started this cycle of applying for National Film Preservation Foundation grants to make sure this film could survive.
I eventually became the Urban Renewal Project Archivist at the Beck Cultural Exchange Center here in Knoxville. I worked at that job for about a year when suddenly, what did I see on the job boards? The Tennessee Archive of Moving Image and Sound was hiring. And actually, I'd gotten a tip from founder Bradley Reeves. He was very excited for me to continue to grow my skills. And he said, hey, I heard that things are getting shaken up down at TAMIS and you might have another opportunity, another shot. And I was torn, actually. I was like, I don't know, I'm doing such important work here. And I know that I went and got all this study just for this TAMIS job, but is it the right decision to make? And after talking to my family about it and really just thinking about, this is the whole reason I went to school. So in early 2022, I was offered the job and it was amazing. I was so happy. I told Eric Dawson, the head of McClung, that they're gonna have to drag me out of here in 30 years when it's time for me to retire because this is all I wanted.
I guess in terms of lasting kind of contribution, it'd probably be hiring John Morton and Janine Winfrey. Trained archivists, they both went to the Selznick School, as did Bradley, and both happen to be really sharp and smart and have not completely different, but they have their own thing. They're doing something different than Bradley did and something different than I did. And so I really do think bringing on them board has set TAMIS on a good course.
We work together very well because he brings an air of seriousness to it and I bring an air of levity, which helps people feel comfortable. But then John manages to really drive home that we are a serious institution and we take things seriously, even though I like to have fun down here in what I call the basement's basement.
In another 20 years, hopefully we will have made that much more progress in cataloging and establishing infrastructure. I would like us to have made more progress in figuring out long-term strategies for maintaining equipment and thinking about ways to stay ahead of material obsolescence.
This is art history that's important to save right now, and it's the most fragile, I think, due to the obsolescence of equipment, the decay of that fragile media, all of that. Really is, to use a cliche, a race against time.
Video, time's up. Magnetic tape is not going to last much longer. In fact, I think we passed the threshold of original predictions of how long that might last. Again, film's such a great medium because it will last long if properly cared for, hundreds of years. But what are you going to do? Transfer all your magnetic tape to film? No.
We're still at a very critical point in saving all this media. And of course, with funding's always been an issue, but now, with many organizations losing funding for, whatever reason, then, it's important to continue to support this work. And especially as part of the library, I think it's really important to be able to do that. Again, this is established as a public entity. It's important to be available to the people.
I feel so grateful to use TAMIS. Like every semester, I bring students to visit the archive. It is such a privilege to have a regional archive here. Usually you have to be on a coast or in a sort of very particular location to be able to get students into the archive. The classes that I teach frame film as an art, as a business, and as a technology. And my lectures can only go so far in talking about film as an object and as an artifact. So having students have a hands-on, experiential awareness of a film and media archive, what it means to be an archive, the sort of preciousness and precarity of our shared film history, I think all of that becomes much more tangible and accessible to students having an archive. So I think TAMIS has become a kind of cornerstone to the way I think about how I want students to understand film and media.
So much of Knoxville's history, especially in the 20th century, is about music, and to have access to the music of the 1920s, 30s, 40s for the first time, really. I mean, a lot of this stuff, we take it for granted now because so much of the stuff is on YouTube. I think a lot of the stuff on the St. James Sessions from 1929 is now on YouTube. It's on a few CD collections now. But as recently as the early 1990s, it just didn't exist anywhere, and that a simple researcher like me could get to. And the fact that TAMIS has found and made these things available, I think, is invaluable.
History is important, and for me, the archives here at TAMIS are just invaluable when it comes to the projects that I work on, or even just wanting to learn and see Knoxville's past. There's home movies, there's professional videos, it runs the gamut, but as someone in the visual industry, having something like TAMIS is a godsend.
It kind of is amazing that TAMIS exists at all and that it's lasted 20 years. I mean, you look at history, it's like nothing had to happen the way it did, right? It's all kind of a series of one event after another, and it could have gone in any number of ways. And so if, Bradley had not been from here and decided to get his film degree, if he had not met Louisa, if they had not decided to come back here and start this, if they then had not decided to partner with the History Center, if Steve Cottam had not decided to give TAMIS a home, if Bradley had not, and Louisa had decided not to donate it to the library. There's any number of ways this could have gone wrong and still not exist over the years. But I really do think the marriage of TAMIS and the History Center / Public Library of McClung is what's kept it going. It was kind of the great timing for those things to happen. I mean, a thought exercise is to think about where all this film would be if none of this would have happened. Where would WBIR's footage be right now? Where would these home movies be right now? There were a lot of film, a lot of audio tape down in McClung that just sat down there for literal decades because no one knew quite what to do with it until TAMIS entered and started transferring that stuff. So it's a really unique institution, and it's great that Knoxville has it.
We could have started off by saying, okay, here's our policies. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. Oh, we're not going to be able to do this because we don't have any money. We're not going to be able to do that because we don't have any time. I'm glad that we started it in the way that we did and the attitude we had. It was kind of, just punk. It was just like pure punk philosophy. Hey, let's do this. Yeah, okay, let's do it. just go out there and do it.